Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. Thanks very much for listening again to Get Out of Rap. Today, I'm joined by Angella Hill-Wilson, who is the co-founder and director of Bridge House Consulting, is a lay trustee of Warwick University. And I'm really pleased. We spoke in the last year, it is now, about you coming on, and we had a lovely chat. And I'm really looking forward, and thanks to this, and thanks very much for joining us today, Angella.
Great. Really delighted to be out in 2022, having my first conversation with your good self.
No, well, let's start with, shall we, a question that everyone seems to love in these podcasts, which is, how have you got here today? What's been your journey that brings you sat talking to me now?
Wow. So in terms of how I started my work career and how I to being here. So, well, I'm a Londoner and very fortunate to, have come through schooling and all of that. I went to Warwick University as a means of escaping mum and dad and taking on my passion around history at the time. And when I came out of uni, my folks ran a pub. They were the one of the first among the black business owners to own a pub in Acton in London. We're a bit of a novelty, and I think I'm being a bit of a novelty in most things I do.
Really?
And they were very keen on me joining the family business, which I did help in holidays, but didn't necessarily want to make that my career yet. So I got involved with an organisation called Programs, which at that time was one of the very early, we were called telemarketing. We weren't even called call centres at that point. So, but they had a graduate programme which really featured bringing on women as leaders.
Wow.
And so, which I said to my parents, I'm going to go and get some real, management and leadership skills. And, true to their word, I joined in the communication side and telemarketing, graduated as a supervisor, and then got into, I suppose, running accounts, being an HR person, or recruitment to begin with. And then I was very fortunate. I had my early mentor, Jane Angling, adopted me to help us grow the business at that time, which became Programs Limited. One of the sort of major players at that time. We had lots of learning and development, experiential, technical skills, communication skills. So it was very intense. Very enjoyable. Many of my friends and colleagues of that era are still making it happen in the world, and you probably have come across them. And it is also the place where I did eventually meet Martin Hill-Wilson,
Really?
who's my partner, but he was working in Amsterdam at the time when we first met at one of the work's social do's. So really, I spent a good 15 years in programs, and the call center environment was like an opening out to the rest of the organization. So I started on the phones, learnt my customer service side, got into business planning. We were one of the organizations that people like to come and benchmark. So very quickly I was describing what I do, how we did it in programs, and taking tours around, taking lots of companies on tours who were looking then to set up their own in-house operation. So working in an outsourced space, but helping in-house organizations to do that. So then I got into developing my consulting skills, business planning, and really then I was out for, I suppose, the next period of time, setting up call centres up and down the UK, as the government at the time was really into setting up call centres in unemployed areas, high unemployment areas, an era that people may not remember what drove many call centres, which drove me from London to Corby. And we set up operations there. Then it went on to Milton Keynes. So I felt I had a really amazing growth and development in the customer service, in research, in all kinds of areas, really. And I think today that is still one of the things, that the call centre is an environment that allows people to grow within an organisation. And then projects went international around Europe. So spent a lot of time on the road, setting up call centres in Germany, France, Ireland, all over the place. I think I hit Spain and Greece. So yeah, I really enjoyed that career. And I think Programs was then taken over by Dimension Data. At that point, they weren't so fascinated, or in I don't know if fascinated is the right word, but anyway, the consulting arm of it was run down, closed at that point, or scaled back. And myself and many of my colleagues of the time decided to continue working with our clients who still liked the work we did. And I became self-employed in 1999. So been running Bridge House Consulting ever since, with a network of associates, new clients, all sorts of people. So and have branched out. When I say branched out, working in the contact center environment, in customer service, but then also in technology spaces, wherever my opportunity. And my main focus as I grew in my career was about the people transformation, was bringing the technology, people and process, bringing those three together, that hub. So
what a storied career.
Go.
I love it. There's a lot there to unpack. I'm fascinated by just your descriptions about how the contact center, the call center, can be an opening to the wider organization. And I think at a time when there's a lot of struggles out there for recruiting talent in, especially at frontline advisor level, that we don't do enough to talk about exactly what you've explained. And your career, naturally, your own skills, work ethic, all of those things play a huge part. But you were put in an environment where you're exposed to lots of different disciplines, right? And that's the beauty of the call center.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of different disciplines, and also we worked as a group. We had the hub, the wheel, as we called it at the time, and we handed off to each other and made sure that connection. And it's quite interesting to hear some of the challenges that these that are there now, that we're having now, are things that I was just trained in as a drill. There wasn't this separation between marketing and customer service, or it wasn't as siloed. Yeah.
And do you think that's a key part of the success that you had then, that this sense of you mentioned bringing the three components together, so what it was: process, customer service and technology?
Yes.
And if that was that's been instilled in you very early on in the company, that's a key reason why you had all of this success?
Absolutely. Plus, the customer, the end experience, the experience for our customers and making it happen is like drilled in our DNA. It's still the way, is at the heart of whatever consulting, coaching or advising practice I do. I remember, this might sound funny, but I remember from my induction day, 3 rings, you answered. You were there, you were switched on, you were available. We prepared ourselves to coming on calls. That is still in my head.
Yeah.
As an automatic response.
Yeah.
Absolutely, those disciplines. And also, it was just the pace of growth.
Yeah.
A lot of changes, a pace of growth, lots of sectors coming in, whether it's finance, technology, pharmaceuticals. So one of the reasons I stayed so long was I got to work across a number of sectors very quickly. Clients would come in, brief you, get you involved. You'd get involved into a program for a period, and then you got a chance to do something different again. So it kept it fresh, it kept it real.
Well, that exposure to different industries, different disciplines, I think once you've tasted that, that's what you want all the time, isn't it?
It is. It has made it super difficult to commit to any organisation with a, only one lens kind of
Yeah.
approach. But it's fantastic because although I was in the people discipline, I couldn't, my outputs or the way I connected to my IT team or the business process people or customer service folk, it was always with that in mind. It wasn't my task. It was how we were working together to get those KPIs to be delivered.
I think that's brilliant. Another thing that kind of, oh, just on one thing and just remembering things, because I started in telesales in a call center in London, in Wembley.
Oh yeah, not far from me then. I was in
Well,
Kilburn.
exactly, yeah. And one of the few things that were trained into us was smile when you dial.
Yeah.
So you could hear the ringing, or you knew the connection was coming. And even now, I'm still I go, okay, smile, because I know it's gonna help me raise my voice. And in those few seconds, it makes you go, okay, this is about the person that I'm going to be speaking to now, just being there. And so some of some of those things have absolutely stood the test of time. What I was going to say, what I loved and would love to ask you a bit more about was how you went and set up so many contact centers in deprived areas. And did you see, were you able to stay and see the transformative effect that had? Because I think it's often overlooked that call centers can make a real positive impact on local communities.
Oh, definitely, definitely. So when I was in a project, we were like there, I don't know, up to 2 years,
Really?
and even moving parts of programs to Corby. That was several years that I was there. But I mean, some of the programs we did, particularly in communities where I don't know. So in Corby, it was a steel town. There was a lot of factory workers. They were not, what we were doing was definitely different. And I would work with job centres and different agencies to get the long-term unemployed back in. Equally, some of the contracts required different skill sets and ways of working. So you were constantly challenged on the resourcing level to bring different capabilities and resources in. So we invested right from the beginning on bringing people in. Some of them was just to get them back into the groove of work if they'd been long-term employed. Some people who were in different sectors coming in to do something, really helping them to, not just by just having training scripts and practice with it, but creating a vibe, an environment where people wanted to belong to, felt it made a difference. And I think that's why so many of the relationships have stood the test of time there. But it wasn't necessarily straightforward.
No.
And I made partnerships very quickly with a number of external agencies that helped us. And we went after awards. I'm an award queen, right? So I think, if people feel that this is a place that good practice is happening, it calls on all of us to bring our highest self. So we were early adopters of investors and people, of every award possible, going for testimonials, encouraging people that you are part of this works. Acknowledgement and good progress was really at the heart of what kept people going. And some of the projects we did for some of the charity sectors, like I remember Bernarda's project, massive things. People were personally interested in what they were doing as well.
I must admit, I genuinely got goosebumps, because I can't help but think of some people who, because there's a real, for the long-term unemployed, I've experienced targeting and help and kind of bringing those people into a call center environment who had never worked in any like environment similar to that at all. And it's a real investment. And it's an investment from a team leader point of view as well, because there's some real challenges, because it's not just about how do you deliver the customer service element. It's helping people assimilate into an environment that's very alien to what they're used to. But the bit that gave me goosebumps is recognizing that people buy into something and their self-worth, you can see it rising because they feel like they're contributing to a team. There's an esprit de corps, and that seeing people transform in front of your eyes over a period of time, sometimes after tears and tantrums and all sorts, but seeing people transform is just so amazing. So I absolutely love the fact that that was a key part of your background and your story, and it seems like you were ahead of your time, as a group, in what you were doing, in that kind of the people focus, in bringing together different disciplines. Was it, I know you're very passionate about the people element and well-being within our industry and our environment. What kind of shaped that, and how does that impact in how you show up now today?
So, number one, win-win. That's my philosophy. If you look for the win-win for the individual, yourself, the work, the organization, then you get behind the motive and the intent of what needs to happen or why people are there. And we were relaxed. Many people were there for a part-time work or part of their journey. Some were wanting to take it the whole way. So I think if we continue to be interested and understand each other's motives and intent, then it helps for it to be more authentic. I mean, we created adaptive resourcing patterns for all sorts of folk because it made a difference to the clients, or it made a difference to the work. So when you look for the win-win, your modeling has that bit more flex. And particularly where we were situated, and sometimes where you're situated, the resource pool that you're pulling on, the local community will bring in so many folk. But for some of the work we were doing, we needed to attract technical expertise, language expertise. So being known for a place to be investing, because when I graduated with a history degree, I didn't even know what the word telemarketing meant.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was getting into. I did know I love communicating, I love making a difference to people, and working with the public. And then the mechanism for doing that was called telemarketing. And whether it was researching, selling, servicing, whatever it was, it brought in many of those elements. So I think still today, I know today that is still at heart, because when you're looking for diverse people and resources, and you need to move at pace and get people involved and want to stay involved, and retention was a real issue at times for folk. And this is where I think the drivers around KPIs and cost modeling really didn't necessarily do the contact center environment a favor. And even today we've got that challenge now. I feel like the pendulum is swinging back towards the middle, where investing in people, investing in the culture, and bringing together that if you want peak performance, if you want people to be more culturally resilient, that they've got to be robust and a readiness for change. So sorry, I can go on.
I do you know what, that's a really interesting segue, because I completely agree around an over focus on KPIs. I think if you're in any kind of leadership position at any level, there's a responsibility in how you use those KPIs, because if you're an advisor on the phones, being hammered with the minutiae, and we all know this, don't we? The minutiae of KPIs about your every moment. If you're hammered with that I think creates such a mental load that's a problem why we don't allow people, we see attrition, because we don't see, it's a key factor, I think, in we could use KPIs for informative reasons and to look at making changes as a group, but and yeah, of course, look at outliers and check things, but to be hammering people when you're asking them to deliver a lovely customer interaction, but if their primary focus is their productivity stats and how many more must I do today, and just that I think is so detrimental to delivering customer experience and at an individual level and a advisor's well-being. It is interesting to hear you say that. And when you say the pendulum swinging, do you think it's swinging back to KPIs or more towards more people focus?
I think KPI is always there.
Yeah,
and they have their performance. A performance environment needs to have
absolutely, yeah,
that framework. I think the investment between the glow of digital I call it the glow of digital versus because the threat of people in the contact center environment and the people element of it being seen as a high expensive resource and cost burden has gone in and out. And in the time that I've been in the sector, there should be no more people because it would have been all done technology-wise. However, we know it's a blended solution. Life is a blended solution. And as organizations compete on service and their brand and that customer connection and experience management, therefore you've got to bring your people on that journey. And whether they're communicating in the chat or they're communicating in an escalation or complaints or wherever they're communicating, they need to show up. And I'm noticing, when I'm on the end of phone calls with people working in a hybrid scenario right now, the ones who are not getting any team time or downtime, they're extending the conversation with me and they're having a little chat with me,
yeah,
because they've done the business and they'd like to have a chat.
yeah.
That works for me because I can learn more or ask for more, but not necessarily. There's a place for both, isn't it? That person shouldn't need the customer call as the only time they really get to have a team chat, which they might miss out from being in the office. So but all organizations are learning. They're learning how to be in this new space.
As a fully paid up member of international, the great things you can learn from working outside of the UK, I just want to go back and ask you about your experiences of setting up call centers in other countries. What was that like?
Wow. Heidelberg, and I think that's what was that like? Well, I did that I had a UK team and we'd have the local team as well. And I would say every country has its own cultural norms, so you've got to take those in straight up into account. The principles are the same. There are some sort of universal principles. And it was fun, really. I mean, I did Alliance Generale in Brussels for a good 2 years, and the union environment there. The union was organised, informed, and very supportive. And the relationship between the organisation and union was very different to the way we see it in the UK. And they made a difference, and they encouraged people to raise their standards there. The local people saw the work in a different manner. So I think that's what's fascinating. Then I think when I was at OneTel, I ran a project where we had the Indian team, we had the UK team, the Irish team. And again, you know, right from whether it's the briefing, the scripting, the the solutions, the whole thing. How I remember, so I think we used to have teams come to the UK to create a sort of normalized way of how they dealt with the customer, but depending on where that customer was calling from, they had different expectations, and that's okay, isn't it? That's okay.
Yeah.
It's I remember for a long time there was this concern about accents and how people, enunciated or came across, and what names they had, and depending on, where the customers were coming from, did they need to adopt new names to be seen as a local person, and they'd have cultural sensitivity training. So to me it was rather fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can remember working in running a telemarketing team in Turkey, and straight away I went to my kind of toolkit and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this, and one of the parts was quite scripted, word pattern, call it what you will. It wasn't word for word, but I said, this is what we're going to do. And my kind of project team very, very nicely were like, look, that's not going to work. That don't do it. And I was very committed. I said, no, I promise you'll see the benefits. It fell on its face, because regardless of the service that we were talking to people about, one of the different, as you mentioned, those cultural norms, I just didn't take them into account significantly enough. That it's a bit of a generalization, because there were still differences, but the majority of the customers we were talking to wanted to have a chat, and they could tell if the agent was scripted, and they didn't like it. They wanted to know about the agent. They wanted to talk about families. They wanted to talk about lots of other things before getting to the service that we were going to talk to them about. That was the dues that you paid to get talking about the service. And it meant just kind of trusting the team a lot more, and trusting the quality team, and trusting in our performance, rather than saying, I've got comfort from knowing that everyone's kind of doing the same thing.
Yes.
And it definitely had an impact in terms of being more open-minded to incorporating completely different ways of working, and trying to get this blend. You mentioned this earlier on, this kind of, it's the blended approach that works best.
Always it is that. And I think that's one of the other great things about the environment, is that you can test and learn, and you can adapt and keep adapting. And it's quite interesting, because there's been a sort of drive over the years of doing it, to hone it, plan it, get it like almost an engineering, manufacturing, get it right every time kind of experience. But we as individuals, as customers, we have different preferences and different ways of showing up in different different activities. So how we show up in a credit control call versus buying something that's of high value, or buying something that's transactional to the individual, are all so different. And I think that's where I was very lucky with both the international and working in different sectors, to feel a bit more flexible and resourceful around that. So and I think what you're also challenged with is we have people who've been in organizations for a long time, or there was a whole period when field salespeople were brought into using the phone as though it was suddenly, they were using it already.
Yeah.
They set appointments in the first place, but there's all this, it's mindset, isn't it? Mindset,
yes,
behaviors and experiences. So that's what keeps it fresh and interesting.
At what point was there a point in your career where, or has it always been there from university days, but this passion about diversity, equity and inclusion, where did that first kind of hit you?
Where did that first hit me? Well, I'd say my family background. So my parents came from Jamaica, and they were the only, my mum and dad were one of the few who came to the UK. Majority of them went to the States or Canada, or are still in Jamaica. So my parents, right from the outset, were very keen on getting involved in the local community, getting involved and getting on, really. And so that opportunity that, you know, they felt education was the way forward, and all of that was going to open doors, and how you came across as a person would open doors. And they took us to lots of different things and tried out different businesses. And my family in the States and Canada, they would call us, and they're all trying out different things. So I suppose being brave and trying out new things was always there. And joining the telemarketing environment, as opposed to sort of one of the more traditional larger organizations, and just, you know, me, Black woman in business, being in a leadership role in 5 years, you know, that didn't really, you know, that wasn't common practice really. So I've just felt that so many people have been great allies, mentors, have adopted me, encouraged me along the way, and I have lived a life and gone to places and done things that wasn't in my imagination, and I'm grateful. So and you don't know what ignites it for somebody or opens up a door, and then, you know, that they're doing their thing. And when I joined programs, it was about creating platforms for people. So I suppose that's been, so yeah, so it's been in the psyche, if you like.
Yeah.
And socially, I love traveling, so I think I'm, you know, I'm inquisitive of others, and including their way of thinking.
And do you feel like a role model now? And because you mentioned there the positive impact other people had in mentoring and stewarding your career development. Do you feel that responsibility?
I feel, I don't even know if I call it a responsibility. It just feels like what you do.
Yeah, natural.
It's just the way it's the way it is. You, like I said, you don't know who you're going to learn from and who needs what next. So yeah. I mean, I'm talking to you. I'm not usually a person who does this. I have turned down many opportunities to do this kind of conversation to a wider audience, because I've been the person in the background, setting things up, making things happen. And, you know, it has struck me as I've done more research and listened to some of those reports that have come out, that, you know, in the talent pipeline, women in the workplace is a certain number, and Black women in the workplace and Black women leaders are like, we're right at the corner of that talent pipeline. And so anything I can join in encouraging and supporting that message on a wider basis, yes. Because awareness is always step one, but doing it. So that's why I'm so glad that you invited me to the conversation, and making it easy for me to get involved and start talking, because yeah, the more people see that you're possible, then that I will be less of a novelty.
How do you this is a kind of like a huge question. It's not a question that necessarily needs your, you know, bullseye answer. It's just more like a conversation. But how it's always fascinated me from university days going into the call center. I love the call center for its diversity, and I think I've mentioned before I've had more women bosses and peer group than men. But in terms of as you said, the kind of Black women leaders, that tiny section of the report, how does that improve over time? Are you positive about the future, and what, you know, how do we do this? How do we get more a better representation of our communities in especially the senior leadership positions?
Well, I'll go back to my win-win philosophy. So first off, I think if we have cultures and leadership and opportunities, frameworks in organizations where everyone is on a path, everyone has space and opportunity to be listened to be encouraged, to be developed, as far as they want to, because not everybody wants that. So if you've got a healthy environment for all, and then you are providing specific supports and encouraging particular communities that are underrepresented, for whatever reason, then everybody's on the thrive, and it's not a win-lose, you know, or, you know, particularly as equality, diversity has been a bit more of a conversation recently, not a bit more, it has been a more significant conversation in the last few years. It's almost a bit like, well, you know, we don't understand this or that, we've got to be right, we've got to be perfect around it. There's a heightened sensitivity. So, you know, I think if everyone is encouraged in their daily routines, and we give opportunities, and this is where I think the social and cultural aspect of a organizational life is important, then people get to know what's okay. So my 12-year-old child is, you know, in a school, and my 6-year-old is in a school where that is now being taught and encouraged, you know, but still, you know, they are experiencing people going, oh, you've got interesting here, what happens there, how does it work, you know. And the more that people see it advertised, show up, you know, it's just more exposure, more opportunities to get familiar, the more it's okay. But there are family histories in the wider society and communities that, you know, will take time to shift, if they ever want to shift or not. Not everyone is going to do that. But I think what I'm loving more recently is people getting the nuance, you know. Because I'd be irritated when people say, oh, well, you know, what do black people, black women or black men or black people think? I think, I don't know, actually. I can speak for me. You know, and you know, I know I've got, you know, my family are Caribbean orientated. I'm learning more about different Africans, different Asian environments, you know, and in the workplace there's so much more research, so much more information that shows different people have different sensitivities and issues that can be addressed. I don't know if I'm answering your question, Martin.
You are, definitely. It's just great to hear, and it definitely is interesting to see how sometimes I do definitely I feel more positive about the future. There's definitely, you know, if you think about me, I'm middle-aged white guy, but I know that there's far more questions about how do you become more active allies, not just allies from the sidelines saying, yeah, right behind this, can't wait for it to happen, let me know when it does. And rather than more people saying, what do we need, what can I do, how do I know more, where do I start? And I think the first one is that kind of education and, like you say, nuance of questioning and being able to say, do you honestly think a group of people all think the same because they share a characteristic? You know, it's kind of like, do I know what everyone called Martin thinks? You know, I very rarely meet other Martins.
Absolutely. And I think on an individual one-to-one level, we can practice empathy. You know, and that's a word that's been coming over more, and we can ask questions and we can check things out. When we're going on holiday, right, wherever it is you choose to go, there's a curiosity that gets ignited into, oh, what's it going to be like, what's the weather, food, oh, what will we be able to do, you know, what language will they speak? And if you bring that kind of spirit to your colleagues, to those in your community, then you will get your answers. You will start to learn, you will make your own effort. And so on an individual level, we can all practice those things. And on an organizational level, then there are practical things that need to be deconstructed. And one of the things I feel in the contact center sector, which is liberating, is the real bias with education, with accent. There's so many biases, but when people want the headcount to be achieved, those biases get relaxed. And I think that the contact center environment has been an environment that's really been more challenged and more at the forefront of doing that. It's not always, but it's been more able to, because it's just had to. So
Yeah,
partly necessity has driven things, but yeah.
I absolutely love that, and I think we haven't even touched some of the other topics that we thought we were going to talk about. But I've loved talking to you, Angela. We should definitely arrange to come for you to come back and to start ourselves talking about those other topics. But it's been a lovely experience listening to you talk about your career and your passion for our industry and people, and the sort of the forward thinking that you've bought and been part of from a long time. I've definitely benefited from, so I'm sure the listeners have as well. Thank you very much for coming on, and I look forward to us doing this again.
Fantastic, and wishing everyone a really good health and some good times in 2022. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela.
Bye.